Back when I was around 10 years old or so, my grandma came to live with us for a while, bringing us up to 4 people in the house: my grandma, my mom, my brother, and me. We lived in a 2-story side-by-side duplex with the upstairs having 2 bedrooms. One was my mom's, the other was shared by my brother and me, and that's where we'd usually hang out whenever we were home, and that's where the PlayStation was hooked up. However, when my grandma moved in, she got our old room, and we moved our beds downstairs to the smaller guest room. Too small, in fact, to get the TV and the game down there in addition to the beds, but we'd still use the upstairs room whenever my grandma wasn't sleeping. So I've been focusing on the bedroom situation for a while now, but you'll see why. That's where it all happened, after all. I can't remember how long she was supposed to stay with us, or for what reason she moved in with us in the first place, but she ended up staying for several months, and we adapted to the situation pretty quickly. Mom got a very convenient babysitter for her night school classes, we got another adult in the place who was a really good cook, and nothing really changed in our day-to-day activities. Even though we no longer had unlimited access to our rooms with my books and games and my little brother's toys, Grandma insisted that we just come in and grab whatever we wanted whenever we wanted. We could even play video games while she napped during the day, she said, but I felt that would have a decent chance of waking her up, and I didn't want to be rude. And so our days went on, and a routine was created. The 3 of us, sans Grandma, would get up pretty early in the morning for school and work. Later in the afternoon, we'd all get home and Grandma would be up and cooking us something to eat. And then me and my brother would usually head upstairs for a while until it was time for Grandma's nap. Then we'd head out to play or go visit some friends. We'd come home when it started to get dark out, and then Mom would head out to her night classes while the rest of us did something indoors. The house we lived in was old. I don't know exactly how old, but old enough to where it had old-fashioned lights that never really lit up everything, and it was all angles and sharp corners. Everything was wood, and over the years it had gotten bent and crooked. Everything was creaking. Combined with the old pipes and the banging noises that would come from them, we basically lived in a pretty cliché house. Luckily, this was back in the days before I had really gotten into the horror of any kind, so it never really bothered me. At least, when it was day, or the lights were on, and there were other people around. Okay, so it bothered me a little, sometimes. Sue me. Point is that while the house might have been a little creepy at times, it was never really anything you'd stop and take notice of. It was more something you might suddenly remember when you were going to sleep in your dark bedroom, listening to the house making creaking, banging noises. So when something happened that did spook me, it was really unexpected. It was a day like any other at this point. Wake up, school, get home, eat dinner. However, a friend and I had talked earlier and decided to head over to the local football field. Now, I say field, but it was really only a somewhat flat parking area that was rarely used, with an old rusty football goal leaned up against a building. But it's what was available without traveling for an hour, so we used it. We got interrupted mid-play through my friend's mom calling for him to come home. No phones at the time for us, but since he lived just a few houses away from the football field, it was still easy enough for him to make contact. So I headed back home too. I was trying to calculate how long I'd spent out there and if I had any more time to maybe get some gaming in before Grandma's nap. So when I got home, I didn't really bother going into the living room to see who was home. I just went straight up the stairs and peeked into my old room, and I was in luck. There was no Grandma to be seen. So I fired up the game and sat down, expecting my grandma to eventually make her way upstairs, at which point I'd grab a book and head downstairs again. 10 minutes passed. Then 30 minutes, an hour. Eventually 2 hours had passed, and still no sign of Grandma. I was somewhat puzzled by this, as I knew I didn't have that much time. Like I said, we'd gotten a pretty solid routine going, and deviations were rare, especially when it came to her naps. So I got up and was going to head downstairs to see if maybe we'd gotten visitors while I was upstairs, or if something else had happened. But as I went through the door, I heard soft, rhythmic breathing, seemingly coming from my mother's room. Now, my first instinct was that Grandma had headed over to my mother's room for her nap instead of her own. She had been complaining about her bed not being all that great a while back, and my mom had said she could use her bed instead. But my grandma had declined the offer, deciding to tough it out instead. However, there were clearly sleeping noises coming from in there, and the few times my mom would nap, she did so on the couch downstairs, so not really sure what was going on. I decided to open the door gently and peek inside, and sure enough, there was a shape under the covers. I could even see the top of my grandma's dark hair at the end of the bed and hear soft, rhythmic breathing noises, although a little less soft now that the door was open. Sweet. More game time for me, I figured. Back to the game I go, thinking I got a lucky break. However, as the time passes, it's almost like breathing noises get louder. Originally, I couldn't hear them at all from my old room, especially with the sound of the game on, but now they were getting faintly audible. Trying to not really think about it too much, I just figured her sleep had gotten disturbed somehow maybe, and after a little while longer, they became inaudible again. So, back to the game my focus went. Then the noises started up again, and this time they started to unsettle me. It took me a while to realize why, however. After all, it was just my grandma sleeping in the other room. But as I was sitting on the floor in front of the TV, it dawned on me the reason for why the breathing got the hair in the back of my neck to stand up. The breathing was now coming from the bed behind me. Now, I've been called a lot of things in my life, but coward has never been one of those things, which is kind of weird, really, because it would definitely fit, especially if you could have seen me that day. I basically leapt up from sitting to standing in less than half a second and spun around to the bed. Nothing. There was nothing behind me. Even the breathing had disappeared in the momentary panic, but as I was standing there, it started up again. Not from the bed, nor even from the other room. It seemed to be coming from all sides simultaneously. Thoroughly freaked out at this point, I just wanted to head downstairs. So, down I go, and with each step I take, the breathing noises get more and more quiet until they fade away when I'm down in the hallway. I ran into my mom, who was getting ready to leave to class, and I tell her that I think there might be something wrong with Grandma, about how she's breathing really hard as she's sleeping. My mom seems confused by this, but she leaves the bathroom to go check. However, she walks into the living room for some reason. Confused and still creeped out, I follow her, about to ask why she wouldn't go upstairs. But then I see it. Grandma is on the couch, sleeping, breathing softly and quietly. I felt ice water going down my spine as I remembered that shape under the covers in my mother's room. I run back upstairs and open the door, and nothing. No shape under the covers. No hair poking out onto the pillow. In fact, the bed is made up like my mom would do every morning. No signs of use. And then from behind me, I hear hard breathing directly into my ears. It took a while before I went back upstairs alone again.